All right, so this is the solution to the question number 3 on the 2010 FRQ, which deals with arrays. Thought it was a nice little problem, cute way of looking at arrays and using them. So we'll take a look at that and talk about the solution. All right, here we go. So in this, there's one class. There is the trail class. And inside of that, there is an array of ints that identify the elevation at different, quote, markers on the trail. It ignores everything in between. Just wherever those markers are, that's what the elevation is. All right, pretty straightforward. We have two different methods that we need to write. The first one is the is level trail segment. That returns true if the maximum height and the minimum height elevation is less than 10 meters. That is pretty darn flat. So if that's correct, if that's the case, then it returns true. Otherwise, it returns false. Part B is the is difficult method. This returns true if there are, throughout the entire array, if the difference between the two different markers is greater than 30 meters, if that happens 3 times, then the trail is rated as difficult. False otherwise. So two different tasks that we're supposed to do, and pretty straightforward. All right. So let's, again, just talking about the algorithm, what do we have to do to determine if the trail segment is level? We're given where the trail starts and ends. We need to pay attention about whether it's inclusive or exclusive. So what we're going to do is store the highest value. So I have create a temp variable called max. Do the same thing for min. So as we go through, we're looking to see which one is it greater than max? Is it less than min? And we're going to be doing some assignments. So there are two parameters that come with this method, start and end. They're inclusive, meaning that I got to include the start and I'm including the end, which is different from substring and different from the way that we think about arrays in a lot of cases. This one is I got to include both of those. Okay, so that's an important thing to be keeping in your mind as you're coding this up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the first element at start to both max and min. I don't know if the trail is starting at the top of Mount Everest or starting at the lowest point in Death Valley. I'm going to put both of them. If there's only one segment, they're both a max and a min. So I'm going to do that. The first element, markers at start, is going to be assigned to both max and min. Then I'm going to traverse the array. I don't need to begin at start, and this is incorrect. I'm not starting at 1. I'm starting at 1 more than whatever start is. So I don't know where on markers I'm looking. Am I really looking at the beginning and the end? I don't know. It could be this is just a segment of the trail. Where is it starting? Where is it ending? So I'm going to take start, add 1 to that. I don't need to look at start because I'm set max and min to that start position, right? So I can look at the next position over. Then I'm going to traverse the whole array. I'm going to keep looking to see, is that elevation, is that greater than max? Is it less than min? And I'll do an assignment if either of those two things are true. At the end of my loop, when I'm out of that, I'll subtract min from max and see if it's less than 10, less than or equal to. Pay attention to that. Is it got to be less than? Is it less than or equal to? What are we talking about? So return true if that's the case, return false otherwise. So here is my solution to that. There's the method declaration. It's a Boolean, so I got to return something. Many times they're going to give you points or remove points if you fail to do that. And again, there's the two parameters, start and end. So I'm going to declare max. I'm going to set that value, the max value, to the first element. I'm going to do the exact same thing with min. All right, so seems a little strange that I would do that, but again, I don't know if I'm going starting at Mount Everest or starting at Death Valley. We're going to be taking care of that. Now, here's my loop. All right, so again, a couple things to pay attention to. Here's where I'm starting at the start, but I don't need to. I could. It's no error. I don't think there's going to be a deduction in points if I set I to start, but it's irrelevant because I've already set max and min to those values. So the first element is not going to be greater than this because it is that, nor is it going to be less than min because it is min. So I can start at the next element. The other thing is because it's inclusive, many times when we do for loops, this condition is just simply less than. All right, so I've got an array and I want to traverse the whole array. It's going to be less than markers.length, and that's going to keep me inside of the array, and I won't have any out of bounds. But in this case, I've got to include n in my list. A precondition of this method says that end is within the scope of the array. So I'm not going to have an out of bounds error by going to end. And then every time through, I'm going to be incrementing by one. That hopefully makes some sense. All right, so now that I've set up my for loop correctly, now I'm going to be doing a test. I want to look to see, is the marker at I, is that greater than max? And if it is, I want to reassign max. All right, I'm going to set max to markers at I. This looks peculiar because I got markers I max, and this is max markers I. But this is only, so again, if it's larger than max, I'm going to reassign max to markers at I. I can imagine that there may be some errors, I haven't looked at them, but the student examples, I'm sure this is a pretty common thing where people say, well, if this isn't true, then in all other cases, and that's not the case. I've got to do a second test. I could have a second if statement, not an else, but now I'm doing a test. If this is already true, then I don't need to worry about min. So an else if makes the most sense, but there's other ways to skin a cat. One way not to skin that cat is to make this an else. So here I'm going to be testing to see, is markers less than the minimum? And if it is, then I'm setting the minimum to markers at I. And that's it. So that's the end of my loop. Now, what I'm going to do is I need to test to see, is it less than or equal to 10? I could do an if statement. I think in class, that's the way we typically did it. I would do an if. If